And stay in your houses. Drive the rats in the tank area.
Yo, up on a, what day is it? Saturday night. As you can see, we're down a host tonight, but we'll make it work.
Yep, we will make it work. And what a great show, at least for me. I think this is one that will be popular with so many people. There's so many people disappointed that this band is no longer going to have shows. I really don't care less if they're not having albums very much anymore, because I kind of found the last three to be meh. But we're talking about fucking Slayer. We're going to talk about their 5 best albums. We're going to rank what we think are their 5 best albums, and we're going to articulate why we like them or why we don't care for them so much. And spoiler alert, I'm not, like, even my number 3 favorite album from Slayer, I have criticism for it. But for my top 2, holy shit, I love them. I've always, and we'll talk about why. So yeah, we're going to talk about Slayer. We have a bunch of Slayer albums to talk about. Hell Awaits. Oh my gosh, Rain and Blood. There's so many of them. And so I think we're going to start with Gangis on this.
We are, but first I'm going to run a commercial.
All right.
Check out this quick word from our brothers over at Poison Valley Clothing.
Let's do it.
That is Poison Valley Clothing. They've got some other designs that Gangis hasn't added to the commercial yet because they've got a Reaper design. They have some new Iron Serpent designs. Make sure you go check them out.
Cool.
Hey, what's up, Babylon Son?
All right, Babylon Son in the house.
Oh, and Kyler's here, so you know I got to do it.
Kyler. Kyler didn't have to look at that last week.
No, he didn't.
But we're ready this week. And like always, people, please contribute. Give us your 2 cents.
Yes.
You don't like them, you can't stand. Don't just say something like, I don't like them, they suck. Give us a reason why. Like, give us an opinion about it.
Exactly.
And go down, if you're on YouTube, go down and type in some comments in there for us. And please share this. Get this out there for us.
Share the shit out of this. Speaking of shit, all right, time to talk about Slayer.
Boy. You might get us all kinds of attention and hits for hating on Slayer. Just like when I hated, I technically and surgically hated on Rammstein, because they're really popular. Maybe all kinds of people will get popular because they're going to say, you got to go see this guy who hates Slayer. Can't believe the things he was saying.
There we go. Kyler's going to be lurking. He's tired and the damn nipple haunts him. All right. You want me to start off with my number 5 or just like a general?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do 5 and work our way down to number 1.
All right. Number 5, I chose their 1983 album "Show No Mercy."
Wow.
Um,
All right.
there was no particular songs I liked any more than the others, but I didn't have like a super overwhelming urge to puke and shut it off, so I made it through that one okay.
All right. So, what types of bands that you've listened to in the past would you say the Show No Mercy reminds you of? Because there's at least 2 bands, and one in particular that Show No Mercy is heavily influenced by.
Yeah. In a few days since I listened to that album, so I need to just double check the track listing on that one, so I kind of remember it. I'm not sure what you're going for there.
Yeah, like so whenever I listen to Show No Mercy, and it came out after Venom, in like probably I think Venom had 2 or 3 albums out by the time Show No Mercy came out, but the song structure is very similar. There's a punk influence, and Slayer has always had such a punk influence that they even did a whole album, even had a Minor Threat cover that I actually like off of that album, but that's an album I can just get rid of.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically they sound like hardcore punk, but like with heavier instrumentals.
Yeah.
Hey, what is up, my bestie? She said we're the dynamic duo.
So Show No Mercy didn't make my top 5.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why it didn't make my top 5, just because they don't sound like Slayer in that one. They sound like Venom quite a bit. They sound like Venom with Tom Araya, the vocalist, on vocals.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's one of those comments I was talking about. So let's articulate why we need to get rid of Slayer.
Oh,
so as a musician, as a metalhead who I listen to modern metal, I think about song structure, songwriting, things like that. That's where I come from. So when I devoured, spit out, I don't even think I could shit it because I spit it out so much when we did Rammstein. I articulated why.
Right.
And I think I was pretty specific because I went through all kinds of songs. I was very specific about why it didn't stick with me.
I have an overall like description of how I'd like to describe Slayer. If your neighbors got into a domestic dispute and were like rhythmically breaking things, and then you whip out a guitar to try to drown the noise out, but you can't, that's what Slayer sounds like.
I could see their solos kind of sounding like when Tom Araya does the witch scream. I could kind of see that. But you must not have listened to Seasons in the Abyss, because that album is really slow. It does have fast parts.
I didn't mind that one as much as some of the other ones.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 5, and this was really hard for me. There were all of them made in the 90s, minus the first one made in the 90s. They didn't make it at all. And then their last 3 albums, they all are very similar to me. Like they're all making the kind of same mistakes. And I will describe what those mistakes are shortly. But my number 5 is Christ's Illusion.
Okay.
So Christ's Illusion came out, and it's not a really vigorous. We could have done Repentless or the one that came out in 2009 that has the song with the dolls that so many people hated because it sounds a little alternative. But I actually like that song.
Yeah, that was a decent track.
But Christ's Illusion is when Dave Lombardo came back, and Dave Lombardo, his drumming is not generic at all.
Agreed.
He is an amazing percussionist. He's one of the first to really do the double bass, and this is before we had the triggers where it was really easy to do double bass. He's a fucking beast.
Mhm.
And so he came back, and he really did bring back some of the Slayer kind of character as far as the drumming, slowing things down and changing the tempo, and not being so like what they really suffered from, especially when they did the punk cover album that I really could do without. That one came out in like I think it was like '96 or '95.
Mhm.
When they got into that, all of their songs, and I would say till the end, they kind of left behind doing the single note melodies and then going into like some fast tremolo picking or chord progressions, but really
Mhm.
fast kind of stuff. And to me, that's why Slayer, like none of their albums from Christ Illusion to Repentless, the last three, are better than like a 2.5 stars out of 5. I would give um, Christ Illusion a 2.5, and
Mhm.
that's my number 5. So this tells you what I think of the rest of their discography. Like
For
I really don't like it so much. These songs are not terrible, but they don't really stand out like the top 3 albums that I've chosen.
Okay.
So on this one, the ones that I kind of thought that were a little better, let me find my notes here for this. What did I do? There it is. Okay. I wrote that Tom Araya was a lot better on this album than the previous 2 albums. It
Mhm.
sounded like he wasn't rushed and he didn't throw the vocals. So I thought Tom Araya did a good job. And Tom Araya is the biggest problem in the band to me. And you'll hear
Okay.
this for several of the albums, why I think. Um, but Flesh Storm is the first song. I like this one. This is like old Slayer. They do have some single note melodies in there, and then it's a lot of kind of faster, kind of thrash chord progressions. Skeleton Christ is a good song, but it's missing the single note melodies. I think that's the third track on the album. Jihad is mostly chord based. It does have a little bit of single note melody in it. And it's that single note melody that's in Raining Blood that's so famous, that's in every single song on Seasons in the Abyss. And it's in, I think, all of the songs in South of Heaven. Catatonic has a really good, like, classic Slayer intro,
Mhm.
and it's a slower song with down-tuned kind of droning guitars. I probably like Catatonic the best out of all of them. And then Cult also has a strong intro. Now this one is like true. They really went back to old the better Slayer, their better years, and it has a really good chugging part in it that I like. I like guitars chugging quite a bit. So
Okay.
having said that, though, like this album is quite inconsistent, even though it's my number 5. And when I looked back at Repentless and the one right before that, I think it's World Painted Blood. Yeah, World Painted Blood is it. Those albums just don't have the single note very much. And once Paul Bostaph gets on percussion, he's a very generic
Mhm.
percussionist, in my opinion. He's good for what he does, but he doesn't have the character that Dave Lombardo does. So that's my number 5, Christ Illusion.
All right. Babylon Sun has a question. Are they cookie cutter? Um. Hoofed Beast, where'd you go? Hoofed Beast. There you are.
Sorry, sorry. My wife is down in Florida, and she called me. She
Gotcha.
knows I'm on this show. Totally knows I'm on this show.
All right. Babylon Sun asks, "Are they cookie cutter?" I mean,
Like
mm,
when you hear Slayer in my top 3 albums, you know it's fucking Slayer. They are
mm,
so unique, but they did not stick with their sound. They didn't have a fall from grace like Anthrax did, and Anthrax got better again, but they got back to like 2.5 to 3 out of 5
mm,
star albums later on. Like the one who took the biggest crash would probably be Metallica to me. But the three albums that are my top three, those are to me the classic
Mm.
sounding Slayer, and those are the best albums to me. And I think most anyone would agree. They might not like and I know a lot of people won't like the way that I've structured
Mhm.
it.
That's fair. All right,
Yeah.
my number 4, I actually went with Seasons in the Abyss. Um, Now, just I do not like Tom Araya's vocals on anything, so I really base
Mm,
this more off of like the guitars and the drums more than off of
mm,
his performances because I just can't stand him.
mm.
Um, but on Seasons in the Abyss, I really liked. I thought Dead Skin Mask was a really neat song.
Oh, that intro
The intro to
guitar,
that song was
yes.
so good. And
Yeah.
then I thought the title track was almost a little bit doomy at parts, which I really
I
liked.
love that one. I shared that one with Babylon Sun today.
Definitely a good song.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that album. I'm actually
Okay.
going to get that one on vinyl. I've decided my top 25 albums of all time because I've actually made a list for this. I'm going to get every vinyl and I'm going to display them on the walls behind me.
I
And
love that idea.
and so yeah. So there will be one Metallica, there will be one Megadeth, one Slayer, and one Tool. So there's a bunch of bands, but every band will only get one album,
Ooh, I
one
like that.
Mastodon.
Maybe we should make that an episode.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
that
know
would be
if for
fun.
three of us we could cover that much material, but maybe if we have another night where we're down a
Yeah,
member, that'd be a good idea to do.
yeah. All right, so Seasons in the Abyss. So yeah, that's an album to me. That album really stands apart. It's the least fast album out of
For
all
sure.
of them. And to me, it's the most memorable album out of all of them. It's heavy still, but it's not as heavy as Rain and Blood. Holy shit, that one is really, really heavy.
For sure.
All right, what's
All
my
right.
number four?
The lovely Stephanie says the only real Slayer song I enjoy is called Hell Awaits.
Oh, well, why don't we talk about that one? Because that's my number four.
Perfect timing, bestie. Perfect timing.
So, Hell Awaits. I wonder if she likes um, the opening, the intro to that song because it's creepy. I remember hearing that in the 80s, and
Mm,
it was a much kinder, gentler world back in the 80s, at least music wise, and what was exposed in mainstream. We didn't have access, like you had to go to somebody's house to listen to Slayer, or you had to have the album yourself. You
mhm,
could not, they didn't on, they did not have um, Slayer on MTV very much until Headbangers Ball came out, like in '88. But that intro to Hell Awaits is super, super creepy. And then when you look at this album cover in the Show No
mhm,
Mercy album cover with Baphomet on the front, that's creepy too. But you got to imagine innocent kids, because kids aren't as innocent today because they have access to the internet and like any secret that a band might have, like you can usually find it. You can get the history of them, Wikipedia, whatever. You can find out all kinds of stuff about them. So yeah, Halloween.
I love that. He's used it at haunted house before.
Yeah, I could see that.
Absolutely.
So I wrote that this album was a huge step up from Show No Mercy in that it was their first step to defining who Slayer were and how Slayer sounded. Um, the drums are still boxy in the production, and they didn't have much money back then. They were on
Mhm,
Metal Blade Records at this time. Um, I liked Hell Awaits, and then At Dawn They Sleep. It has that signature single note melody, but it's
mhm.
at the end of the riff, and it's not as strong as it became in the following album.
Okay.
So yeah, when this came out, this was some scary shit. Like these guys were pioneers for promoting, although they aren't Satanists, they just kind of did it to fuck with religion. but they would
Right.
use satanic imagery to mess with churches and stuff like that because we had a lot of that in the states in the 80s, and
Right.
they were taken to court often and things like that. Not Slayer, but bands were being taken to court and
Right.
accused of all kinds of horrible things. So they did it for attention, kind of like Shock, and they were kind of the leaders of Shock. They were super, super heavy for their time. Although the band Possessed was doing more kind of uh, death metal vocals, and Bathory had black metal vocals with pretty fast, pretty heavy music in
Yeah.
1985. Slayer was more popular, and they were I think like when I remember all the t-shirts that I would see, like I was like, man, those guys are satanic. That's scary stuff. When I was so yeah, Hell Awaits is my number 4. It's not an album that I think is amazing. I would give it a 3 out of 5 stars, but kind of only because it was groundbreaking.
Hmm.
It's not an album that I listen to a whole lot outside of the Hell Awaits track that I have in my Spotify.
All right. Moving on. Number 3. My number 3 was South of Heaven.
All right.
I thought that one, the solos were better. Some of the breakdowns were a bit more complex. There was more tempo changes and diversity in the sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And the tracks I liked the best were South of Heaven, Dissident, Aggressor, and Spill the Blood. That one especially. I friggin' love that one.
Yeah. So I'm with you. That's my number 3 as well. I might as well jump in since we're talking about it. And this was hard for me, and I thought this was maybe going to be my number 1 because I
Mm-hmm.
love Spill the Blood and I love South of Heaven. Those are my 2 favorites off of this album. I also, let's see, let me grab my notes. It's on the other page. I also love Mandatory Suicide quite a bit. Like
I do too. That was a good
that's
one
another
too.
one. But in this album, they pulled away from Rain and Blood. Rain and Blood was their fastest, heaviest,
Mhm.
nastiest guitar solos and hitting the whammy board and the wee that stuff. They didn't do it as much. They definitely did it, but not as much as they did in Rain and Blood. And they
Right.
slowed it down quite a bit. And to me, that's something that Rick Rubin was pretty good at.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping a band, because they're still heavy, it's still really, really heavy. The
Right.
imagery on the album cover is really creepy.
It is.
It's a lot like who was that painter? Think about
I
it.
know who you mean.
He does all these tiny little figures. I should have
Yeah.
written it down because I've been thinking about it all week. I'll think about it in a little in a few minutes. But he's a famous. I think he was a Dutch painter,
Something like that.
and he did all kinds of religious kind of heaven and hell pictures,
Yeah.
demons eating humans and
Right.
stuff like that. I've got one of his books upstairs. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyways, this album cover was really, really creepy, and it has like a pentagram like made of swords with the Slayer
Yeah.
logo in it.
I thought that was a cool way to do it. It's just different.
Yeah, like you used to see this stuff like it was that was usually on the back of the shirts, and I
Right.
just thought those kids were very daring to be wearing those concert tees in the 80s. Um, but yeah, this is where they slowed things down, especially South of Heaven. That
Definitely.
is my favorite Slayer song of all time. It's my number 3 album because I felt like every song wasn't as consistent as the next 2 albums. But there are some real barn burners to me.
Absolutely.
Nobody sounds like Slayer. Like
No,
I
they
think
don't.
anybody, if you don't like Slayer, I think you'll at least say that they have a very unique sound.
Yeah, they
And it,
definitely do.
and it's these last 3 albums, these are the ones that I love. Now, my big criticism for this album is all with Tom Araya.
Yep.
It's his fucking vocals, and he sings off key. They tried to get him to sing in a monotone way, and it's off key, and
Horrible.
that sounds like shit. So that's why this fell all the way to number 3. But he doesn't do that type of singing in South of Heaven, and that's my favorite song.
Yep.
Another thing that I would say on this album is I think this album might have the best drum production. That snare snaps and it stands
Yes.
apart from everything else, and especially when they slow it down, you that in the South of Heaven song, when he hits that snare,
Hmm.
it's heavy and it really occupies and carries the song. It holds the song together. So I love this album. I might have to get this one on vinyl as well. But fuck you, Tom Araya, for not being able to sing, and fuck
Yeah.
you, Rick Rubin, for not making him go back and sing it again. Maybe he did sing it 100 times for each song, and he just kept fucking it up and couldn't get it right. But that's terrible off-key singing is the only reason why this album is my number three. Because I think the musicianship, if I could listen to it as an instrumental, is fucking dope.
Absolutely.
Do we need to run a commercial now?
Sure. All right. Check out this quick word from our sponsor over at, where is it? There it is. Villain Arts Tattoo. Mischief and Reaper are going to be at the one in Chicago coming up pretty soon. And here's just a little snippet of what you may or may not see at that show. All right. Yep, that's Villain Arts. And like I said, Mischief and Reaper will be at the one in Chicago. So check that shit out. Babylon's Son says, was that artist you're looking for Goya?
No, not Goya.
Mm.
Oh my god. I can't I'm using my phone for this, so I can't go in and look it up. He's a artist from gosh, like 400 years ago. I can't think of it. I have a degree in art, so it should be there. I have not smoked anything tonight, so I should be able. I've only had a couple sips of my beloved whiskey. Have another one now.
All right. All right. Let's see. My number two. I already know you'll probably give me shit for this because you said you didn't like the last three albums, but I had to choose 2015's Repentless. I thought the guitar work was a little bit more exciting and it was like more legible in a way. It was less hidden by, some of the nasty vocals, and the drums are like a little more balanced, I thought. And it was a little bit less repetitive. Like the riffs just seemed to be like the same three notes over and over, but it was like just a little bit more varied in this one.
Yeah, so Gary Holt was the guitarist for Exodus, and
Right.
when Jeff Hanneman passed away, he stepped in for him, and he stepped in before Jeff Hanneman passed away.
Mm,
And so to me, I can hear Exodus.
absolutely.
That album sounds like Exodus quite a bit in there. And Exodus is a great San Francisco
For sure.
thrash band.
And I like them better than Slayer, so the fact that it sounded more like Exodus than Slayer or something I enjoyed.
Yeah, so that album, like when I listened to it again, I haven't listened to that album in years. I hated the video with the prison break. I thought it was really
I
stupid.
didn't even watch videos.
Yeah, they've got a video, and they recorded it in a prison, and Tom Araya's beard is all gray. It just looks gross. Like he's got dark hair, but this big, nasty, gross gray beard, and like whatever, dude.
The songs I like best are Vices, Cast the Firestone, and I just absolutely love the introduction to When the Stillness Comes.
I
The
like that
beginning of
one.
that song is so cool.
I agree. That's my
And,
favorite one on
you know,
that album.
then Tom Araya opens his mouth and ruins it, but that's okay.
Yeah, I felt like when I heard that song, I forget which one it is that has the prison video, but I didn't like him on that one. That song sounds real generic, but I thought he did all
Yeah.
right compared. South of Heaven, I think, was one of his worst. Well, he wasn't lost, but it was that when he tried to sing clean and it was just off key. Ugh, hated that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised that's the one that made it into your number two. It's not a shit album, but
Mm.
I would call that a 2.5 out of 5 star album, but I would call all three of their last three 2.5
Yeah.
out of 5. They're okay. I don't think they're great. Because even in that album they've fallen into the trap of being more chord dominant and having just
Yeah.
chord progressions and more like that kind of punk. And that's what Metallica has done for years and years and
Hmm.
years. They've foregone using the dueling guitars on single note melodies and
Yeah.
yeah, don't need to say any more for that. Well, my number two is Rain and Blood, and I think a lot of people.
Damn it, Mrs. Hoofed
Sorry
Beast,
about
stop
that.
trying to call him.
Somebody else calling my goddamn store number. Like, what the hell? I need to maybe use my laptop from now on. Like,
It's like
who
so
the
freaking late in the night, though, so they'll be calling your store.
yeah, who the hell's calling my store at 10 at night? Jeez. I'm gonna send them a strongly worded message. Just kidding. So, anyways, it's my number two is Rain and Blood. Most people pick this as the number one. This is a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece if you're really into fast, really hard tremolo picking. The guitar solos
Mm.
just soar. They're nasty. This is a super dark, twisted album. And the song, to me, the best one in there is Raining Blood. That is the one that, like, when you learn it on guitar, it's a lot of
Mm.
fun. It has that single note melody that sticks in your head. Angel of Death, Piece by Piece. I mean, every song
The song I
on
like
this
best on that
album.
one was Jesus Saves.
Yes, that's probably my number two, I would say, Jesus Saves. That's a really heavy song, but
Mm.
my number one for sure is Raining Blood. Just that intro guitar
Yeah.
melody. It's classic, classic um, Slayer. But what I like better is like with the music that I write myself and most of the bands that I listen to is I like the tempo to change. I don't like it to be the same thing and just like, 100 miles an hour the whole time. I like to slow things down and take us for a turn and pull us this way and that way. I find that a lot more interesting.
For
And
sure.
Rain and Blood doesn't have that quite so much, but they do have super nasty quick tremolo picking.
Hmm.
And this has a pretty good production as well. The snare snaps fairly well, not as good as South of Heaven, and I maybe it's about in the same as like Seasons in the Abyss. But this album artwork once again with the fucking goat man on it
Yeah.
and these horned people, like this is really creepy. And they use the same artist for a lot of their albums. Christ Illusion used the same artist. South of Heaven is the same artist. Seasons in the Abyss is the same
Hmm.
artist as well. But this is what most hardcore metalheads are going to say is number one, and they're going to say this is their best album. This is the album to me that absolutely solidified their sound as Slayer. Like when you hear this album, nobody sounds like them.
That is
And
true.
I don't even call it thrash. Like it's just to me, it's more like speed metal, but not
Hmm.
like Venom or Show No Mercy Slayer
Right.
speed metal. This is like their own shit. Nobody sounds like this. Love this album. I have to get this one on vinyl as well. I love this
Mm.
album. That's my number two.
All right. So when I was doing my research for this list, And I decided to go through some other top lists, like other, lists that took all their albums and ranked it, and scrolled through them a little bit, just seeing, what other people thought and, how they ranked it and stuff like that, just to kind of get my head rolling a little bit. And I thought it was funny that the one that I picked as my number one was literally the bottom of every single list I read.
Just makes me laugh.
I know, because it's not a bad album, better than some of their other ones. But I chose 1998 Diabolus in Musica,
That's the
which
one.
I thought was just so fucking cool. It had some new metal influences, new metal sounds, which I love new metal. I think it's better than the traditional Slayer sound, so it was nice to hear something different.
I have to disagree with that.
Yeah.
But this is an album that Slayer fans love to hate, and I don't hate this album. I just don't find it really, really good. I do hear the new metal influences in it. I don't think it's bad.
One thing I did really like is that on some of the songs, there was definitely some sort of like filter over Tom Araya's voice, which helped.
Yeah. He's not he actually is pretty good live though. Like his voice, like when he's got his voice correct, uh, like the better albums, like Seasons in the Abyss, like that album, he does sound like that throughout. That is the album that I predicted you would like the most.
I'm not surprised.
And then I think I was gonna say that I was thinking you were gonna choose World Painted Blood as your number two because it has a little bit more of the new metal, and that Playing with Dolls song is a little bit kind of rock. It has kind of a rock new metal kind of intro to it.
The songs on this album I like the most though were Stain of Mind, let's see, Over Enemy, and Screaming from the Sky.
I liked Screaming from the Sky. That was probably the best one that I liked on that one.
Yeah, that one was really different. I liked it.
But I think a lot of Slayer fans are going to say that's a 1 out of 5 stars, but I don't think so. To me, that's just like a bunch of the others. It's a 2.5 out of 5 stars, maybe a 2.5, 2 out of 5 stars. It's not awful to me, but I don't find it great. Anything else on your number one, Gangis?
I think that about covers it.
I do appreciate you having thoughtful things to say, even though you don't like Slayer. Yeah. That's fine. I just don't like it when people just throw blanket statements and don't try to rationalize or justify what they're saying.
I just can't get past Tom Araya's vocals. I just can't because they're so prominent, and I don't like the way his voice sounds. So that's really what ruins the band for me is him.
Yeah, I can see it. Like he's not real talent. He's not a talented vocalist to me.
No, not really.
And his bass lines, because he's playing and singing at the same time, his bass lines are not challenging bass lines. And he doesn't hit every note like the guitars do either. He it's a very simplified version of what you're hearing.
It was funny listening to all of them. I'd be like, oh wow, it's been like 2 minutes without vocals. This is a true instrumental. And then he'd open his mouth. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. I would love to hear these albums instrumentally. I'd love to hear Tool instrumentally. There's a lot of bands I'd like to hear instrumentally. This is one of them. Not all their albums though.
No.
So my number one is Seasons in the Abyss.
Okay.
So I remember buying this on cassette in 1990, the day before I graduated Ranger School. My parents flew out to Fort Benning, Georgia, and the first thing I wanted to do was go to a record store because I just loved going to record stores. And I got this album, Deicide, self-titled Deicide, which was a classic death metal album, really creepy death metal album as well. I got Megadeth's Rust in Peace, and I got a Prong Peel Sessions cassette. And I remember going back and listening to all of these. And right off the bat, this is out of those four, this is the one I didn't like the most.
Mhm.
And now this is the one I like the most out of all of
Okay.
those. I even like it better than Rest in Peace, and I love Rest in Peace. But I love this album. This will be on my wall as I collect my top 25 uh,
Mhm.
metal albums of all time. This will be on there. And the reason why it will be on there is because I could play a bunch of these songs years ago. I remember them a little bit. I can find it my way around them. But in this album, Rick Rubin produced to me their better albums, and he kind of slowed them down. He let them be fast and he let them be brutal, but he slowed them down. And it's when he slowed them down and you let Dave Lombardo hit that snare
Mhm.
and it kind of fills some empty space. Love it when they do that. And so off of that album, my favorite song off that album is Seasons in the Abyss. And that is, like we were talking before, that song is a bit doomy.
For
But
sure.
everything else, Skeletons of Society, that's another
Mhm. That was a good one.
favorite. Dead Skin Mask, that intro little
Yes.
slow
Oh,
riff with the single notes
yes, I love that intro.
really sticks with you. I love every single song on this album. I love it. They're all bangers, just outstanding. I hate the artwork on this though. This looks like
Yeah, it looks like, a high school art project gone wrong.
yeah, it's like dumb. It's like
Yeah.
they used gouache, which is like heavy. Hieronymus Bosch is that artist. I just thought about it. Sorry, that's my squirrel. Yeah, so this painting reminds me of Hieronymus Bosch. It just stuck in my head. Isn't that weird?
That
How
is
like
weird.
I'm midstream talking about painting, and then Hieronymus Bosch pops into my mind. I don't know why I couldn't think of it earlier, but Hieronymus Bosch did all kinds of like little demons eating humans and
Yeah.
creating terror, depicting hell and all the horrible things that are supposedly going on wherever that is. So, anyways, back to this terrible painting. I hated this album cover, and it really turned me off. Like I've never been very sensitive to album covers,
Mhm.
and until I started to think about my reaction to this one, I hated it. It looks like somebody only had big fat brushes when they painted the skull, and
Yeah.
they didn't have a finer brush. And that big boring skull just kind of is right in the middle. It dominates everything.
Do you think
There
that's
are
paint?
some.
Do you think they did it with pastels? It almost looks like pastels.
It could be. It could be a charcoal and pastel drawing.
Yeah.
It
That
could
doesn't
be.
make it any better, but it
Yeah.
explains a little bit why it looks like the way it does.
Yeah. But this is the album that I saw them on for the first time, and
Mm,
they were on the Clash of the Titans tour where I'd mentioned before Alice in Chains opened up, and I loved them. And Alice in Chains was way less heavy than
mm,
Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer. But Alice in Chains, I was glad they were there.
for sure.
I enjoyed their show. Jerry Cantrell's guitar sounded great. It was slow. Lane Staley sounded great. But when Slayer came on, there was this dude sitting behind me, and he had been headbanging the whole show, and he kept headbanging, and his sweat was flinging on
Oh,
me. That was like, no, sir. I turned around
mm,
to him. I told him, knock it the fuck off. He was gross. You don't get to go to a
no,
show and throw your nasty sweat on other people.
no,
I'm
that's
sorry.
gross.
I'm sorry, dude. Get a life and fucking contain yourself and go
Yeah,
sweat on somebody else. But
agree.
that's a bad memory from that. And I got the live album. It's a double CD album. I think it's Live Aggression, something like that. And that album is really good. They didn't. I saw them in at the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm.
When I saw them, it was like July 2nd, something like that, in 1990,
Ooh, my
91,
birthday. July
1991. Sorry.
2nd.
Yeah, yeah, but great show. This album to me with Slayer, what I love, the single notes are there, those single note melodies. They change the tempo throughout, and Tom Araya is doesn't embarrass himself on
Yeah.
this. Now, I can understand people not liking his vocals. That's fine. But to me, this is their masterpiece. It's not as heavy as Rain and Blood, and somebody wants to say no, Rain and Blood is number one. Okay, fine, I'm fine with that. I would argue with them if they said South of Heaven, just because of Tom Araya's horrible clean singing on there.
Yeah.
But there you go. Like I love Slayer. Seasons in the Abyss to me is that's the best one for me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I liked a little bit more than I thought I would, but still definitely not a band overall that I'm gonna go out of my way and go listen to.
Yeah. Actually, I think when I was thinking that you would have liked Season in the Abyss because they slowed it down
Yeah,
quite a bit, and you can kind of there's like resting points in it in a way.
for sure. But yeah, that one it made my list, so close enough.
Yeah. I get really bored with extreme metal bands that just, go 100 miles an hour the whole way. Like At the Gates,
Yeah.
to me, that's an overrated band. They're just really, really fast all the time. I can't distinguish how they're being different or anything
Right.
that's like super unique to me. And a lot of true metalheads they'll hate me for that, but to me, they just like hit the pedal to the metal and don't slow down, don't add very much variety, and to me, that is At the Gates.
For sure.
All right, how about honorable mentions?
Let's go back to my notes.
I don't really have any because I've kind of talked about them. I don't like God Hates Us All. That album is not good to me.
No.
To me, that's the worst one. To me is when they covered the punk bands. I definitely don't like that album. I will never ever listen to that one again. Show No
Well,
Mercy.
I made it through that album, and I think the only note I wrote down was "ugh."
Yeah.
It was just so bad.
Show No Mercy. I won't probably ever listen to that again. Although I love the album cover. It was really challenging societal norms when it came out.
I really didn't like Divine Intervention either.
Yeah, I didn't like that one either.
It was like Rain and Blood Part 2, but worse.
It sounded like they rushed Tom Araya's songwriting in there.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
one I thought Tom Araya kind of messed up.
Yeah.
I did not like that album at all. It didn't have much edge to me.
No.
That's when they had brought Paul Bostaph into the band as a percussionist, and I didn't like him. He had been playing with a really good band, Forbidden, and Forbidden was a lot better than that Divine Intervention album.
Yeah.
So I really don't have any honorable mentions. I'm glad you brought up Divine Intervention though, because I had such high hopes for that album because I loved Seasons in the Abyss so much. Yeah, so what's your issue with Rain and Blood? Is it just too heavy for you?
I mean, yeah, it's just obviously I like heavy, but it's nothing but headbanging. Like I just feel like it's just constant. There's very little tempo changes. I mean, a little bit, but not a lot. And it's just boring because it's so monotonous almost.
Yeah, I don't find it to be that way because of all the single note melodies. Because that's not when they do the single note melodies, they're doing different percussive things that are slower,
Yeah.
and they're not just driving forward. But that album's fucking heavy. That's their heaviest album for sure.
I felt like, especially on that one and some of their other early ones, the guitar solos were kind of mediocre and not very exciting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm maybe too much guitar oriented when I listen to things, but that's what I pick up on the most.
Yeah, they would admit, and Kerry King actually after South of Heaven took a lot of guitar lessons because they were pretty much like doing a scale, just a really fast scale, running up the neck, and then hitting the whammy bar at the end. Wee, 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 wee.
Yeah,
and it was a bit formulaic.
for sure. And there's like no build up to the solos either. It's just like riff, 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 solo, riff, 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 and I'm just like,
yeah,
where's
I
the build up?
Yeah, I can see that. Like I can see if you appreciate that. Like a lot of people would, but yeah, they were trying to break ground and to be seen as the fastest and heaviest
Yeah,
band at that point because that was 1986.
right.
Hell Awaits was 1985, and then I think it was the latter part of 1986.
Hmm.
They came out with Rain and Blood, and they were really trying to push things. They had received all kinds of criticism for being satanic and
Yeah,
scary and super extreme because they were really extreme at that time.
yeah,
I wouldn't touch them. I was too scared of them back then. I really was. Yeah,
yeah.
the damn my parents, like I was raised as an innocent child, and then the damn neighbor that lived behind me that gave me a ride my freshman year for half the year to school, she would just kind of preach to me her fundamentalist church shit
Oh,
on the
jeez.
ride to school. And a lot of it, she knew I was into music. And so she would cut down the most popular metal bands at that time. And I liked some of them. I didn't even care for a lot of them.
Hmm.
Well, so Gangis and I have already decided what we are likely going to do next week. And
We have.
I sure wish that Reaper was here because Reaper would have got to have a vote.
Exactly. But
But just like you didn't get to vote last week when we decided Slayer,
hmm,
I don't think Reaper gets to vote.
exactly. You miss a
But
show,
I
you have no say. Sorry, no sorry.
but I do miss him. You know, he would really love to do Dream Theater. You know, I because I don't think he would miss 2 weeks in a row. I'd like to see him get on for Dream Theater.
We could do that.
Yeah. I actually I like Dream Theater, but boy, I will criticize them as well because there are a lot of
For sure.
aspects about Dream Theater that I do not like.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
especially their churchy gospel message that is in a lot of their stuff that I just like those are songs I don't like.
Yeah, no. All right.
Well, this was fun, Genghis,
It
and I
was.
hope you guys all had a good time. And if you haven't listened to Slayer before, like I would highly recommend my top three. And even like Genghis's, that one is the one that Genghis liked, number one, the Diabolus something.
Yeah,
Um, like that one is a little bit more approachable, but I don't find those as good. But to me, Seasons in the Abyss, that's the album I would go listen to
I'll agree with
if I
that.
were
Yeah,
you. It slows, changes the tempo down. It's really catchy, but it's still heavy.
definitely. Speaking of heavy, make sure all you motherfuckers out there stay heavy.
Okay. See you guys next week.
See a corpse rotting in this wasteland.